Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company. Today I'm thrilled to be talking about the wonderful documentary Blink. I am joined today by co-director Edmund Stenson, along with documentary subjects Edith Lemay and Sébastien Pelletier. And Edmund, I wanted to start with you because I've heard you say something that I thought was so interesting about how you saw this story in the film, in that you feel like it's this idea of the broadest topic of how we respond to obstacles and situations in life when we're faced with them.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of ethos and approach, and was curious about how that led to the way that you wanted to tell this story and make this film.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the case of this documentary, it was very much learning from our subjects in the sense of telling a story that was authentically true to their experience of the world, but also reflected how I wanted to tell it, as you suggest. So I think my initial idea about that came from very much how Seb and Edith talked about the future and the resilience they needed to instill in their children. But I think I wanted to find a way to go beyond that in telling the story, which was not only to tell a travel log, not only to look at the ways in which they were preparing their kids for the future, but also to do that in a more emotionally grounded way. And I just didn't want to get stuck making a film in which we had the resilience and we had the inspiration, but we didn't have the emotional truth at the core. And that for me was, following Edith and Seb on their journey and their experiences with RP and coming to terms with what it might mean and coming to terms with that in an emotional way. So that meant that when we were on the shoot, we tried as much as we could to find spaces and times as we were shooting where we could focus on that emotional through line, which was their grappling with the anticipatory grief of what might be coming in the future, what might be lost, but also ultimately what might be gained.
Yeah. And Edith and Sebastian, I mean, I was really interested in the conversations that you had with Edmund and with Daniel Roja, who's his co-director on the film, before saying yes to this, because, the media had picked up interest in your story, which is how everybody got involved in making this documentary to begin with. But you weren't just saying yes to this for yourselves, you were saying yes for the entire family. So what was important for both of you to know about what this experience was going to look like?
I think we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We just thought, oh, I think our only thought was, oh, a documentary, that's going to be like nice souvenirs and nice pictures. We didn't go like far beyond that, I think. But right from the beginning, we trusted them so much that we were never worried about.
Well, we worried before meeting them, but when the crew came, it's always something that, it's just, will it change the dynamic and how will it go? And I think once they were there and we had our first interactions, we were reassured, and it really went probably much better than we would have ever thought.
Yeah. And because Edmund, you were on the ground with Edith and Seb throughout filming as well. What was the time that you all spent together before you started filming for the project, or did you dive straight in with the cameras all together?
No, I mean, we had a couple of Zoom chats, and we spent a little bit of time getting to know one another before we started shooting our first trip. As with documentary, the time crunch is always so real that you're always trying to negotiate that balance. But we tried as best we could to get to know the family before we started the process. But it's always a question of doing a little bit behind the camera and doing a little bit on the camera, and getting all of us acclimatized to how this process is going to work. Because as you can imagine, it's different for every film, it's different for every family. And obviously there was an extra challenge and joy in working with the kids because, as you can imagine, it's a new experience for them.
And Edith and Seb, I really, really love the way that you let your kids direct what this trip was going to be, and the thought process of, if we ask them for a list of countries, they're not going to necessarily know where they want to go, but they know the experiences that they want to have. And I was just curious about how you came up with the idea to have them create a list of activities to then come up with the itinerary of countries.
Actually, that was how did we come up with the list?
Well, we thought about countries, but when talking with them, it was kind of, blank stares. And at some point we said, well, what do you want to do? And we were at dinner table, and it's like,
I think the first answer was like, eat ice cream. Like, what do you want to do on this trip? Eat ice cream. Okay. So let's make a list of what you really want to do. And then they came up with like all sorts of crazy idea, like they wanted to, like Leo wanted to see Pokemons in Japan. Like, well, that might not happen, but let's put it on the list.
Yeah, there was no barriers, so it was a fun exercise from both sides, and it's just like
it wasn't serious at first. I think it was just like a silly thing to do to get them involved a little bit in the trip, but like it changed during the trip because it became kind of the backbone of the trip.
Yeah. And how planned and structured was the itinerary of this trip versus the space that you left open? Because we see you going, oh, maybe we'll go to Egypt next. We haven't quite figured it out.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to leave in July 2020, and obviously, a pandemic hit during that time, so we had to postpone. But we had a whole great itinerary all planned out, and almost, by the month and things like that. And we had to redo it every 3 months. We're like, oh well, we're going to be able to leave in 3 months. So, after 16 iteration, we just said, we're fed up, we need to leave, and we just went where the first country was open, and it was in southern of Africa. So we left, and then we planned month by month. So going from all planned to month, really had a drastic change, but I think it was for the best. So we could really tailor it to our what we wanted at the time.
And Edmund, that must have been an interesting experience for you and the rest of the crew in terms of not necessarily knowing where you're going to go next, because each place that you went probably had very different logistical challenges to it.
Absolutely. I think Edith and Seb would make great documentary producers, given that they were making changes and having to deal and working on logistics in the last minute. It was just a question for us of keeping in conversation with them and planning to come on shoots that we felt could help with the story. And with documentary, you never quite know what you're going to get, especially with 4 kids. But I think there were certain trips that we knew, both the family knew and we know. For example, Nepal, that was an obvious choice. It has obviously visually, metaphorically striking themes. So there were some trips that were obvious to us, and then some that we planned a little closer to the time.
Yeah, it's wonderful. What were some of the challenges when it came to filming? Because again, it's just like you have all this equipment, you have your crew, and you have so many different terrains that you're stepping into, which require different flexibilities.
Yeah, and you have a director of photography who wants to bring 400 lenses with him wherever he goes. Love him though I do, and you can see in the beautiful images that he's an incredibly talented man, but I think the first solution we had to that problem was keeping the crew small. So it was me, Jean-Sébastien Francard, the DOP, and we had a sound person, and sometimes Domingo, our second camera. And so keeping the crew small made it easier, but I think you hit upon it correctly. The hardest challenge is you're climbing a mountain with the family, and you're trying to find shots, and you're also carrying camera equipment up the mountain. Though I will say that we had porters helping us, and so we had a lot of local collaboration, the places we went, to make the whole film possible. So I don't want to paint a picture of us as being the intrepid explorers who carried and did everything all the time. We were very well supported on our team.
Yeah. And Edith and Sebastien, I wanted to ask about what it was like kind of watching your kids become very adept with the filmmaking process, because, we see you guys talking about, oh, the sound guy's the hero for listening to them all day. And, one of your kids at the end is like, I know what you're going to ask me about this trip. You're going to ask me how I think I've changed. So they really had a sense of what the crew were thinking and how they were telling the story.
I think because the way they bonded with the team, like from the first day, it was like having friends for them. So they didn't see it as like making a film. It was like when they were expecting the crew to arrive on the trip, they were all excited. Not, oh, we're going to be filmed. It's like, oh yes, they're coming. It's going to be fun. They call them Team Rocket.
Yeah, Team Rocket, as in the Pokemons, and gave them each one had their own names.
So, I think maybe the first day when you putting the mic on, that was bothering, they got used to it. But after a while, I think it just, for them, it was just fun with friends. Like the camera didn't matter, except for not watching in the camera, maybe.
Yeah, logistically, I suppose, from a filming standpoint, it's a challenge trying to film kids that their mic is dropping all the time. They're looking into the camera, so they're really not into let's be serious about it and let's focus on it. It's like it's just a normal day.
But that's the trade-off. One of the beautiful negotiations in the film was, yes, Seb's right, but on the other hand, what we were allowed to experience with Seb and Edith's kids and what we were able to capture is it's not often stuff that you see in a documentary, this level of access. And I think time spent with children and the way that our camera follows them. And I think that's the beautiful trade-off we have in the film. And I just want to add that our nicknames, in case you're wondering, I was a giraffe because I'm very tall. And our sound person, my other favorite nickname was the jellyfish because the kids couldn't remember his name. His name was Giles. So they were like, let's just call him the jellyfish. So these were the kind of signs we felt that we were doing our job and we were feeling connected to the kids.
But I also really like how you can tell that you kind of let the kids direct the way that the story was told, because as much as there's the big moments and important conversations that we see on screen, we also get to see, just how they play, or you'll be talking to them about something interesting and more in depth. And then all of a sudden they just have a complete non sequitur. And that's exactly how kids go through the world and how they converse with people. And so how did you let their kind of narrative structure form the narrative structure of the film?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was learning from Edith and Seb in initial conversations I'd had with them about how they'd said the trip had been. So I remember one or both of them telling me, we'll be on this big trip and we'll be in the desert and we'll be looking at this incredible vista. And the two adults will be saying, look, kids, look at this. And then Lauren will be off to the side looking at a little bug or asking his mom if he can eat this bug or whatever kind of questions the kids would ask. And I think for me, it was finding a balance between kids are irreverent. They don't follow the narrative logic of anything that's happening in the world. And it was a delicate balance between how many times we could place that in the film, essentially. There were cuts of the film where there were more of these moments, where we had a whole scene where Lauren is asking increasingly ridiculous questions about, why do monkeys' asses look so dirty, Mom? Why did the monkey take this? Why did they do that? And it's beautiful in itself, but we found when we put it in the context of the film, it started to lose the magic because there were so many of them. So it was always a question of, these kids are wonderful and are filled with these insights and beautiful moments. And it was just a question of making sure we were sparing with where we placed them.
Yeah. And I almost feel like for you and your family that it's this amazing collection of home videos. And I think especially because of how Edmund and his team filmed it with those little slice of life moments in between. So what's the experience for you in terms of just having this really elaborate version of a home video from this movie?
What a beautiful gift, really. Like, that's how I see it. We were so happy and grateful when we saw the movie for the first time, because we didn't know what to expect. I mean, we trusted them, but you still don't know what to expect. I don't know anything about filming a documentary. So yeah, really great gift.
And Edmund, you really let Edith and Sebastien and their kids be the voices of this story. And even when it comes to explaining, the diagnosis that the kids have with their eyesight, that comes from Edith talking about it on screen. And was it important to you from the offset that they always be the ones telling their story throughout, and that there wasn't going to be any sort of voiceover or other voices in the film?
Yeah, I think, as in the beginning of any documentary, we weren't sure which way we were going to go, but we knew, as you say, that this was a film that was more universal than telling one particular diagnosis. Yes, it's the catalyst that leads to this incredible trip and year for this family, but it didn't feel like the right film to tell that story. What felt right to us was to be emotionally grounded in the family's present day experience. And that, to me, would be the richest emotional experience for families watching, because ultimately we felt, and we continue to feel, that this film has the potential to touch families everywhere and to be multi-generational in the people that can appreciate it. You have grandpas, you have parents, you have kids. And we wanted to make sure that was the focus, because it felt, like the truest experience for me of the film.
And for you, Edith and Sebastien, how do you feel like this trip and the conversations that you ended up having with your kids really opened up your understanding of how they're seeing the world, with the fact that their eyesight is constantly changing? Because one of the moments that I loved, for example, was Edith seeing you with your daughter Mia and asking her, when you close your eyes in the desert, what are you seeing? How do you feel? Do you feel like you would still want to travel to these places?
I don't think it changed our views. Like, the kids are so much in the the present moment, that like for them it's really hard to think about the future. When you ask them, they're going to think about it, but it's not like in everyday life they don't think about the future that much. So we had to, like, we used the trip to prepare them, but we didn't focus on their condition during the trip, because we wanted them to enjoy the trip, enjoy it, and not think about it too much. So yes, we did a little bit, but most part of the trip we did.
Yeah, and I think most of what we're trying to do, and hopefully we did a lot of that, is give them the tools they need to face the future. But at the same time, they gave us a lot in the sense that, it's a present moment and that's what's important, and let's be in it and live it. And I think, as parents, you're always trying to plan the future, always trying to see where your kids are going to be and things like that. But, they taught us throughout the trip that, what's important is what's happening now. He always says, I see well during the day now, so that's what's important. I'll see, whatever happens in the future, I'll deal with it when it comes. So I think it goes both ways.
It's really wonderful. And did you find that on the trip as well, that they just constantly circumvented your expectations? Because there's the moment where Laurent's playing football with some other kids, and at first you're saying, oh, when it gets dark, then stop playing, because they obviously struggle to see at night. And then you start to see that he has this like sense, he uses different senses to see where the ball is, and he's still playing just the same, and it's wonderful.
He has a trick.
I have a technique, Daddy.
Technique, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they did that with their vision, but like in their life in general, it was amazing to see how it was easy to travel with them. They adapt to any situation, and a lot of situation where a lot of adults would have complained, like 24 hours, like bus ride, and like it places that are dirty or not not comfortable, and the kids were just, it's not a problem. So it was really amazing to see them adapt to all these different situations. So it made us think, okay, well, the future is going to be okay. They can adapt now, they're going to be able to adapt to anything in the future.
I would just add to that I think this speaks to the question you asked me earlier, Mara, which is that it felt exploitative to tell an emotionally a dark story when these children were giving us the tools and the direction to tell a story that has pathos and deals with difficult questions, but to overly focus on it felt to us exploitative and untrue of, as Edith and Seb put it, where the kids are and how they, how they're seeing the world.
Absolutely. And one of the scenes that I think was really impressive in watching how they responded to it was the moment where you all got stuck on the cable car for several hours. At the beginning, and watching that scene, you think, oh, they'll get them down really soon. And then it was many hours into the night. And obviously, Edmund, you were there with them, with the camera crew. And so what was that experience for all of you in getting stuck there?
Actually, I was not there.
Oh.
What happened is it was Saturday night about 8 p.m. and I get a call on my phone from Seb. And I think at this point, you'd been stuck on the cable car for about an hour, 3 hours. And he calls me and said, Ed, well, this is cinematic drama if you wanted some. And he's kind of laughing it off almost like you said, like, oh, probably things are going to turn around quickly. So we, from a filmmaking perspective, had to scramble, had to go through all our contacts in Ecuador and essentially find someone who in the middle of the night, this is 10, 11 p.m., had to climb the mountain with the firemen and women who were rescuing the people in the gondolas to get those incredible shots you see outside. That's just a gentleman who climbed the mountain to get there. He did that. He got a call at 9 p.m. saying, do you want to climb a mountain and film a gondola? And he just ran off and did it. But we were principally lucky because of Edith's great instincts in filming. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Edith, I think, was there something useful for you in filming all of that time? Was it helpful to have something to?
Yeah, it was so boring too. So, it was scary, but mainly it was boring because you're stuck with 4 kids. So taking the camera out for me, it was a way to, okay, let's focus on taking images and capturing that. So it helped me stay calm and focused, I think.
Yeah,
it's amazing because I just immediately assumed it was the camera crew. I didn't realize that you guys were the ones filming that whole segment.
No, we're all by ourselves stuck in there.
Yeah, we were joining them the following week, so we were just preparing to come and join them on a different part of the trip.
He was there on the phone.
For moral support.
Yes, making sure, are you filming?
That may have been my first question, I think.
Was the trip as a whole a journey of realizing, you can plan so much, but there's just always every day, every week, every place you go, there's going to be something that's going to come up that you couldn't have anticipated?
Definitely. Yeah. You learn to let go.
And Edmund, one of the choices that I love in the filmmaking style that really struck me is the perspective being on the kids' level. So we're really seeing all of these places and the world the way that they see it, to the point where you have the camera physically kind of sitting at their level and perspective throughout. When did you realize that that was going to be such an important part of telling this story?
I think very early, in the sense that Jean-Sébastien, the DOP of the film, he and I had initial conversations about how we wanted the film to look. And my obvious reference point, well, a reference point for me was Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. I love the way the scenes with the children are shot. And he and I would talk through these kind of references, and we knew that one of our goals was, whenever you see a moment like that, you have to drop everything and take that moment. So I think of the sword fighting in Nepal as an example. Things like that catch you off guard. It's not necessarily something we'd planned either from a crew or family perspective, but we had a priority of, if we see those moments, go capture them, because they're cinematic magic and they're not things that they're once in a lifetime. Yes, kids are going to sword fight all the time, but seeing it on cinema like that we had to capture them whenever we saw them.
And I think JS had a camera that he, I don't know how you call it, but it drops down and looks down. Yeah. Instead of up.
We had a gimbal that you can invert so that he could be right at the feet of the kids as much as possible. And he's just such an adept cameraman that, that's a testament to how brilliant he is at what he does.
And I love that detail. Oh, sorry.
His relation with the kids was so great that they felt they were, with another friend. So that's why it was so, I think, like he was really in the game with them,
Exactly.
So it changed it made it easy, I think, easier to be able to have those scenes without my kids feeling they were being filmed.
It's great. And off the back of that as well, I love the Tree of Life reference, because it's so interesting to think about the fact that there's a lot of documentaries that follow kids, but we don't really see them using that particular perspective. And so did you find that you were very much looking towards narrative films for that idea to build the visual space?
Absolutely. I think it's when I look back at our references from early stuff, yeah, absolutely. That was the place where we felt most comfortable, and we didn't necessarily feel we could find exactly the right references in the documentary sphere, because I don't think a trip in this way in a documentary has quite been done in this particular style. So we really needed to go into fiction. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were planning out this trip as well, it feels like you experience all of these places in such an intimate way. And a lot of that comes from the fact that you're camping and you're doing homestays. So you're really kind of immersing into those areas. And how do you feel like doing a trip in that way really allowed you to connect very uniquely with everywhere you were visiting?
Definitely. It was and it's not something we planned that way. Like the first reason we traveled like that, I think it was budget wise. But for me, it's like one of the magic part of our trip is all those people that we met and all those connections we had with people all over the world. And I really do think even if we had a bigger budget, we would not change the way we travel, because it's so much more meaningful to travel like that, especially for the kids.
What were some of the experiences or places that you really kind of hold on to the memory of that maybe we didn't end up getting to see in the final version of the film just for time?
There's so many.
Yeah. There's so many, but one example that we like to think as our, probably our best moment is we spent almost a week in a small village in Nepal, and not on the trek, but previously. And we all bonded, and especially the kids. There was these 20-some people who were working with the local people, and they were now their big brothers, and they were hanging around and putting them on their shoulders and just playing all these games. And all the kids of the village after school came and played these little board games, etc. So for us, just this bonding and just this richness of oh, let's go play soccer. We have a ball, let's go play. And then all the kids play for the next hour. That was really, one of the best experience we had, and an example of what we were able to get throughout the trip. And that's probably the long lasting memories we'll have, more than just the sceneries.
It feels like they were playing soccer everywhere they went across the world.
Well, we actually carried a ball where we took it out. Sometimes we gave it and bought another one. And
it's like a magic tool.
Yeah.
When you take out a soccer ball, like the kids just come around and play together. It's amazing to see kids from all over being so different, not even sharing like a common language, but through play and through soccer ball especially, it's just there's no barrier anymore.
Yeah, it's an international game. It's probably the most widely known. So
can you imagine being an Englishman and having to stand behind the camera watching so much football and not play? It was one of the most painful experiences for me. I desperately wanted to play every single time for the very reasons you're saying.
So that was the most challenging aspect of making the whole film, not playing football.
All right, it was very challenging. I see a goal, I want to shoot in the goal immediately. This is, so that was a big challenge for me.
I mean, also from a filmmaking standpoint, kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier with the different kind of challenges in different spaces, I was also interested in, from the way that they did this trip, and they did it very grassroots, how that shaped things for you and your crew as well, because I imagine it was a little bit different. It wasn't, okay, the crew are going to go stay in this really nice hotel. It was like, we're boots on the ground with the family throughout.
I mean, very, very much so I remember in Nepal, we were all staying in the same places, eh? It's the same in the Amazon, same in Nepal, same in Egypt. I mean, I think if you're looking at Edith and Seb and wondering why they're laughing so much, I think they look at me and think of me as quite a city boy with his white trainers, and look at those great nods. And I think it was an experience for me too, to be in those places with it, to be traveling long term and to be camping and doing stuff that honestly I'd never done before. I've never camped. This is my first camping experience was in the Egyptian White Desert of all places. So, I mean, Edith, how did you describe me when you first met me?
Yeah, exactly. A city boy. That's really, I kind of like the first time I met Ed in Malaysia, it was the first evening, and I see his white sneakers, and I'm like, oh my God, am I really going to travel with all of them? I kind of got scared, really. But honestly, Ed is so, it was amazing to see how professional he was. He put through everything, like the cold showers in Nepal, and he was such a trooper. It was impressive. But I think also that the fact that we stayed together, like we had no choice to stay together, so it probably was harder for the crew because they were stuck with the kids all the time, but that I think that brought us all closer because there's no separation. Okay, we're filming you, good night, we're going in our big hotel, we stayed together, and that made a big difference, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With the filmmaking as well, I wanted to ask about working with your co-director, with Daniel Roja, because you were very much boots on the ground, and then he was kind of back on location, and you would be sending dailies and sending footage back to him, and he would kind of start looking at scenes and how they could potentially come together. And so I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that collaboration.
Sure. I mean, he and I have been working together since 2016. We're very close friends, and we have different but complementary strengths in terms of what we focus on when we make films. And so it's one of those collaborative relationships where there's a shorthand and there's a lack of needing to be, it's not like I was calling him daily about making the film, because he knows if I'm going out with JS and I'm working with the film and the family, he's got a good sense of what I'm gonna shoot and what I'm gonna get. And having edited several of Daniel's films too and co-directed before, it was a pretty smooth process in terms of the story's shaped as we're filming it. He and I have conversations, and we started building our idea for what it might be on the road as I was with the family. And then it was just a question, once we got to post-production, of working closely with the editors and refining that story.
What was some of the biggest challenges when it came to post-production and really just going through this monumental amount of footage together?
I think we were lucky enough, I will say to begin, that obviously Edith shot a lot, but we had an incredible associate editor, Rochelle Hamilton, who had the unenviable task of going through all of Edith's footage and all of our footage and telling everyone what the most interesting parts were and helping us in that initial process. She did an absolutely amazing job at helping us, set the skeleton of the story. I'd say otherwise, I had an initial idea that we filmed a lot more at home with the family, and we got beautiful stuff. But I thought initially that our film was going to be bouncing a bit more back and forth between home life and the trip. Because this is a film about memory, I had an idea in my head that the present day would kind of take us back into memories of the trip. But when we got into post-production, we found that the trips in themselves spoke so much more clearly and were so compelling that it would actually do a disservice to the family's story to do that. But that was very much something that we had to learn and to figure out in the edit suite. And that's why I'll always say an editor is a second director, because they are the people reshaping your initial ideas once you get to that point.
Yeah. And Edith and Seb, I think one of the great things about travel, and I think especially the way that you did it, is that you kind of learn so many instincts and survival skills that you have. Like there was a moment where you're trying to bring the body temperature of one of your kids up a little bit because they got a little too cold, and you kind of instinctively go, okay, we're going to take your jacket off, add an extra layer. You're using your own like warm breath to kind of warm up the hands through the gloves. And what were some of the things that you kind of learned about yourselves and just the instincts that you had along the way when you had to do things like that and figure it out on the fly?
I don't know. I think we were pretty adventurous even at home. So, and we live in Canada, so that cold reflex has been from childhood. But
maybe one of the things is that in dire situations, humor always helps. That's one thing that helped us get through a lot of things. We got a lot of very, very long and nasty bus rides and other adventures that are not always, as planned. And I think, our kids have been so great. And the fact that we were able to get humor and just laughing about it really helped a lot of situations, really made a big difference.
And I think like in those situations, it's one thing when you have to manage yourself, but we found like with a family, you need to manage like everybody's well-being and make sure everybody's okay. So, but at the same time, for me, focusing on that helped me because there was no space for me to be cranky or tired. Well, most of the time. And because I was like, we were carrying our kids' state of mind like on our shoulders, so we focused on that, so it helped us actually.
Yeah, the kids are very in tune with adults and especially parents, so knowing that you don't want to show anything that you feel inside because it's not going to help. So
cheer them up.
Yeah.
It's fun to be stuck on a
break down after, but not during.
And obviously, at the end of the film, we see those conversations with Edmund and his crew where they're basically asking about how you feel like the trip has changed you. And I imagine that it's also had a long-lasting impact, just the intimacy of that time that you spent together, in such a compact space with one another for that year. And so with even more of kind of a retrospect and looking back at this trip, how do you feel like it's fundamentally changed the fabric and the texture of your family for the better?
I think like when you stuck together for such a long period of time, there's no space. If there's a problem, you need to solve it. You cannot just escape and hide in your room and stay away from the other. You're stuck together. So I think we've learned how to address any issues or any problem amongst the family and find solution and be more tolerant with each other. And also I think for the future, like the amazing memories that we share together, all these adventure, all these inside jokes that there's so many of them. Like it pops up all the time in our daily life, and it's just it's magic. It's just it bonded us.
And kind of taking you and your crew's own question to turn it on to you as well, Edmund. How do you feel like, working with Edith and Sebastian and their kids and being a part of this journey has kind of changed you in a different way as well?
I think what would happen a lot on the shoot is that being around parents and kids a lot, it makes you think a lot about the way you were parented. I'm not a father right now. And I think we had so many conversations as a crew about how we grew up, and the bigger question is, what kind of people did our parents want us to be? And it really got philosophical at points on the shoot. And I think looking at Edith and Seb, one of the things that I most appreciated and always appreciated is that there's a freedom to the way their kids are in the world. And you can see the very real effects of that on their confidence and their self-belief and their belief that they could do anything. And I think that is one of the greatest gifts you can give your children, is the confidence and the self-belief to live a rich life and to know that you can do it and to know that your parents are there behind you. And that, I get emotional thinking about it. It really touched me, and it really genuinely inspired me and made me feel like these kids are going to have such an amazing life. I'm fully confident of that.
I love that answer. And it was such a wonderful film. And I loved the opportunity to get to kind of know your family a little bit through this snapshot of the movie. So thank you so much to all three of you for talking about it today.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.